What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Canes Insight Daily Podcast, powered by Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. It is my favorite day of the week. It's Wednesday. We got the freshly tanned Michael Ryan Ruiz. We got Peter about ready to hop in. A lot to talk about: ACC movement, baseball, basketball, always football, spring practice. Give you the latest on that. Take your questions. We're rolling. Who knows where this thing's going to go? Excited to talk, man. What's going on, Mike?
D, it was a pleasure tanning with you over the weekend. That's the first time that we've ever taken our shirts off next to one another. And
you forget about the George Hotel and
yeah, that's right, the George
A&M.
Hotel at College Station. All right, so it's the second time, but it's the first time that I've taken my shirt off where I feel like my body's competing.
Look good.
Yeah,
look good.
Someone called them bleep gutters. We'll leave that for another day. Pete, I see those beautiful peepers. Hop on in.
I was not.
You were not tanning with us.
Next to
you were invited though.
Clearly, you would have beauty and golden right now.
Yeah,
very fair skin. There's no tan that could help this out.
I got so burnt. The toxic male urge to not ask other dudes to get your back with sunblock. Yeah. It's tearing this country apart. I want to lead with something that isn't a sexy headliner that got underreported, I think, but. In a few years' time, this will actually be huge for the University of Miami. And I'm going to do something I have never, ever done in front of a microphone. And that is give Jim Phillips, the ACC commissioner, credit. Pete, are you aware of what happened? Because a lot of people don't know about it. It's like BlackRock taking over the Panama Canal. Like, it's very underreported. Are you aware of the ACC settlement that went down?
Yes. The buyout was reduced in like 5 years for teams that want to leave the conference.
Yes, and at like in 2030, 2031, it flattens out at a real bargain price. Miami played this masterfully, and Miami didn't luck into playing this masterfully. What ended up happening was FSU and Clemson, to a degree, spend all sorts of resources trying to get this result, and Miami plays the political game, publicly backing the ACC, staying out of that messiness, not burning bridges, which, by the way, potential partners are seeing how FSU is attacking the ACC. And I can confirm that does give them pause because they're a bunch of rabble-rousers. Miami gets exactly what they want while they don't spend any resources. Chess, not checkers, is what I was told. Miami played this to perfection. You have talking heads from the SEC and Big Ten saying that the ACC basically signed itself up to be rated in a couple of years. That's not going to be Jim Phillips's problem. Jim Phillips is probably not going to last till 2030. He needed to do right by the people that backed him, played the nice game, and he did just that. He maximized leverage in a situation where he barely had none, D. I'm really excited about this. And if I had to bet dollars to donuts, I'd say by the end of this decade, Miami is out of this godforsaken conference in the ACC.
Great take. I agree. I think the big picture here, I always said, because I get asked a lot of questions about conference realignment. It is not my favorite topic, just personally. I know it gets a lot of ratings and people care about it. My focus is on the Canes, and I agree. We played it right. We didn't spend money to get to the result we wanted anyways. The key to me this season, all this talk about who brings the most ratings in, who's the biggest brand. This season, when you look at the ratings, Miami's number one in the ACC by a good amount. Over the past 5 years, which, I understand some of the stuff's calculated going back 5 years, Miami's third, right? Just off brand strength because the team wasn't very good with Clemson and Florida State up top. So if Miami can continue to be number one in the ratings, which just means they win, because Miami wins.
As long as Miami is relevant, they will maintain that position because an irrelevant Miami was top three.
Right. So if we're number one after 5 years, every conference in America, and really there's only two, who knows what the future holds, we're going to be the hottest commodity out there because Miami brings in ratings. So that's more my concern. We just had to be relevant again. We are currently relevant now. Stay relevant. Obviously, everybody's goal is to win a championship, get back to the playoffs. That's part of being relevant. But just staying in that conversation where we're ranked, people are talking about us, kids are picking us in video games. That is an elevated floor from where we've been in the past. And that's going to allow us to get to the top, both from a competitive standpoint. And then, of course, when you talk about conference realignment and being in a conference that's going to give you the right revenue.
Quite frankly, I think this is one of a handful of wins that Jim Phillips has secured as commissioner. The SMU, Cal, Stanford thing worked out. They're not spending a lot of money on that. They're getting paid to have these teams in there. And Cal had an interesting year in football.
Best trip of the year.
Yeah, it was a great trip. It was Cam Ward's most iconic game. SMU strolled into the conference and embarrassed everybody that, like us, that has failed to get to Charlotte multiple times, failed to win an ACC championship. First year, SMU's saying this conference ain't so hard, but it's been a win. Basketball. So I had an interesting conversation with Seth Davis on the Le Batard show this week, and he said that while other conferences in America were skating to where the puck was going to be, the ACC was stuck skating to where the puck was at. And that's not foresight. I think Jim Phillips finally showed foresight here. And I understand why conference realignment is a boring subject, especially when you got laser focus on one program. I think people pay so much attention to football that the expectation was rich get richer, right? I was always maintaining this will usher in a new era of parity, which we saw. And with an expanded college football playoff, that helps too. But everyone just assumed, like, man, the SEC has been dominating pre-NIL. That's surely going to happen once you start paying for players to go to your school. It actually didn't. We had more parity. The SEC's grip and stranglehold on the sport of college football loosened. Big Ten gets in there. Big Ten surpasses the SEC. ACC even competes a little bit more. You're seeing the wealth spread there a little bit. But while you're paying attention to that, you're not noticing what's happening in the other sports. Look at what's happened to the ACC in basketball. They may still have the national champion in Duke, but the SEC has taken the reputation of the ACC for themselves. That is a power basketball conference. Look at what's happening in baseball. Power baseball conference. Look what's happening in women's basketball. Power conference. Teams all littered through that top 10, while the ACC is lagging well behind. They have maybe one team that you can get behind in each of these sports. And that is where this stuff is going to matter. This is just for, like, what are we, year 4 in the NIL? Look at the gulf that the SEC has put in all these other sports. Everyone was expecting football, but all the other sports that they're putting in between them. And that is because of their resources. And Miami, in this rev share future, which has already identified the 4 sports that they're going to contribute the most to, the ones that I've outlined, they are playing an impossible game of catch up. They cannot catch up as long as they're in this conference. And thankfully, through Jim Phillips' work in maximizing leverage that I felt was non-existent, Miami is positioned to at least play catch up in a couple of years' time.
No question. But you said baseball. Obviously, SEC's been dominating college baseball for a while. I do think, and maybe there's a transition to the baseball topic because there's a lot of baseball comments. We saw the game yesterday. I actually think, unfortunately for the Canes this year, that the ACC is the best baseball conference this year. We'll find out. There's still a lot of baseball to play, but I do think, SEC baseball is ridiculous. The stadiums, the coach salaries,
the resources, it's insane.
So I'm not saying this to dispute your point because you're right. Just for the ACC's favor, man, I went and looked at the Baseball America top mock draft for 2025, 2026. ACC dominates. So there's some heavy hitters in the ACC right now. I do think over the next couple of years, just with the talent infusion, you will see ACC be the best conference in college baseball at a bad time for Miami, quite frankly.
That's interesting, especially when you consider some of the coaches that are in this conference that are maximizing their team's talent level. They were in on this Miami job, and Miami made a conscious decision. And I got to say, it's working out. And if you're a baseball fan, I hear your frustration. You got to realize where you are in the pecking order. Dan Radakovich had a top candidate for the job. He didn't get the baseball job. There was a Wake Forest manager that was extremely intrigued in this job, doing amazing things at Wake Forest with next to nothing in terms of NIL resources. Miami went cheap. They went in-house with a position coach that pretty much everybody wanted out in the first place. And I gotta say, like, for the head coach, he needs to turn this around quickly. When you bring in a guy that was already on the staff and you promote them, you don't get a longer leash. It's the same thing that happened to Manny Diaz. If you were part of the problem, you need to be the solution much quicker than a new hire would be, because the new hire is starting all brand new. There were promises made from important boosters that back the head coach. And I don't know if they've come through. I don't think it's a resource issue really when it comes to the collective in baseball. I think this is a leadership and decision-making issue and possibly an acumen issue when it comes to head coach. Look, we've seen in that sport, people fail their first go around and then go on to successful careers. This is a tough job to have down here in Miami, especially when you manage expectations. And by all accounts, he's a good guy, but he needs to turn this around real quick, or I fear this might be his last year.
Yeah, I mean, going to the game yesterday, for those who didn't see, UCF pretty much destroyed the Canes. I know at one point when I stopped watching, I think in the 8th inning, it was like 17 hits to 6. The score was like 14-4. It was just a complete and utter blowout by a very.
It was everything that you feared about the offense.
The offense just they have good games here and there, but they're behind where we were last year, and we weren't good enough last year. It was one of the worst offenses in the ACC. So looking at a daunting ACC schedule, and I mentioned Wake Forest, we play them this weekend. So they got 2 players in the top 10 of the this year's mock draft.
It's a hell of a
You
head
talk about their
coach.
shortstop, talk about Ethan Conrad at center field, someone that Miami was in on in the portal. Disappointing. And it's the thing that concerns me the most from a baseball standpoint is we are adjusting the expectations a little bit. I'm thinking you got to get to a regional, when that was a given for decades. And now that even looks tough. And just kind of like a situation that really crystallizes how things have not gone really well for the Hurricanes baseball program. So there were 2 shortstops on the same team here in South Florida. I believe it was McCarthy or MacArthur. I'm sure Canes Cat Heat will correct me in the chat. But there were 2 middle infielders for a local high school. Antonio Jimenez, who was the higher rated prospect, and Justin LeBron. And they both were shortstops. They played on the same team. We decided to recruit Jimenez over LeBron, which he was the higher rated prospect.
Mm-hmm.
Jimenez comes in last year, starts, hits under 200, and transfers. LeBron goes to Alabama and is incredible as a freshman. This year, Jimenez, who's transferred to UCF, and he's hitting like crazy for UCF, had a double against us yesterday. And Justin LeBron is probably the best player in the country, period. He's the projected number 1 overall pick in the 2026 draft. So 2 local players, and we ultimately didn't end up with any of them, and they're both balling. It's Miami needs help in the middle infield. Obviously, Ogden's having a great year, but he can play a lot of different places. A very, very disturbing kind of slice of the problem for the Miami Hurricanes. Obviously, it goes deeper than that, but yeah, man, I'm concerned about trying to improve over last year. I'm concerned about trying to make the tournament. I'm concerned about the ACC is looking like.
I pose this question to both of you. Pete, I'd like to get your thoughts on it too. If JD can turn this around, there's going to be a groundswell to get him out of there, led by people that didn't want him there in the first place. The tide is going to rise. Rev share is a mere certainty, although I'm still trusting. It's kind of weird, D. Like, everyone is acting like this is a certainty for an entity that hasn't won a single case in court. It's just perplexing, but whatever. That's the way that we're going. If JD doesn't turn this season around, and it's not a terrible season yet, like there's still time for this to be a good season, but I think we're paying attention to some of these results and some of the competition that we're playing, wondering what's happening there. I gotta think that his job is in serious jeopardy, Pete.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think the same sort of thing you look back at with Manny Diaz, and it was a similar hiring process where I don't think there was,
a nationwide search.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were other people involved in the baseball search. But
I can verify that the baseball search was certainly more thorough than what Blake James did with Manny Diaz. It was just a decision of cost.
Yeah, so I think you make a hire like that in-house, and I don't know if the leash is as long as it would be if you bring in someone from the outside, and I think that's where that sort of comes in. I had said all last year, look, he didn't have time last year to get into the portal, but obviously that wasn't the case this year. So, I mean, it doesn't look like it's trending in the right direction, but I refer to D on baseball stuff.
I got to frame it differently for D because he's ever the politician, and D is never going to be associated with a clip unless things get just brutal, unless there's like a Miami loses to FIU in the Orange Bowl type of result. But you do have your finger on the pulse on the Miami baseball community, and if this keeps heading down this direction, the overwhelming sentiment is going to be get JD out of here. Yeah, I mean, we're kind of already bubbling to that surface, aren't we, D?
This is a very important season, and Rel did a great post. Pete, pull this post up on the Canes Insight while I'm talking here. CanesInsight.com, 7 million posts and counting. If you're a baseball fan, this is the most active baseball board by far for the Canes. Looks like every other board is the most active. Basketball board's humming, football recruiting portal always humming. But he had a very good post comparing the team this year to the team last year through the same time period. And basically the offense has gotten worse. Pitching's gotten better. The results are pretty much the same against good teams, or real teams, let's say. There you go. So, some of these numbers doesn't look good. You could read the post on CanesInsight.com, but basically this team is trending in the same direction as last year's team, just a little better on the pitching side, a little worse on the hitting side. And last year, of course, was the worst season since, before Elvis went to war, before he went to Korea, before he joined the army.
Look, I know this falls on people that, it's unfair. I know that they're the people in charge.
Went to Germany. Sorry, I'm losing. My Elvis references are all wrong there. Before Elvis went to Germany to join the army, there was no war.
Quite frankly, this is all John Skipper and the ACC's fault for signing this terrible deal. Miami would have the proper resources necessary, I think, to keep chugging along. Like I said, Omaha feels like a birthright down here, and what's happened over the last season and a quarter is unacceptable, flatly. Miami is a relative newcomer and a historical outlier, even in football, when it comes to their success. That is not the case in baseball. They are a blue blood. They are a traditional powerhouse, and the expectation should be managed as such, and they flatly haven't been. And it was a business decision. And I love going to the light. I love drinking the milkshakes. I love Miami baseball. But I can tell you straight in the face, if it comes between Miami baseball and Miami football having a double-digit win season, I'm taking the double-digit win season every time. And when you have limited resources and you can't compete with the SEC and the Big Ten because of your crap TV deal, tough decisions have to be made. And you hope against hope that JD can be the answer, and maybe all these boosters will rally around him, and he could be the guy that you thought he was when you first brought him onto your staff. And you take that gamble because you have to. You can't afford to make aggressive hires because you literally can't afford it. So ultimately, Miami did what was best for business, and we're seeing with how they are now positioned very well inside the ACC when it comes to their ratings and the rev share agreement there, due to this deal by Jim Phillips, is it was the right call. The cost, though, comes at the expense of the baseball team.
I'll push back a little bit on that. I don't know how it's going to go going forward with the rev share with Jay Lucas and all that. I don't know the future of it. Miami, resource-wise, is set up equivalent to the ACC and better in some circumstances. Mm-hmm. And when I look at the ACC, Florida State's probably the best team in the country, arguably, when you look at what they have. Wake Forest has top 10 picks, multiple every single year. Duke is a great program. Virginia is a great program. Even Louisville, who's had their own struggles with the portal, they've been able to get high-end guys. So, Virginia Tech last year was pulling guys from D3 that were playing, hitting the ball way better than what we've seen from a lot of our players. So I don't think it's a resource thing. What we see right now on the field, I don't think that's a resource thing. Going forward, who knows?
Mm-hmm. I think that Miami has to strike on fewer lottery tickets. I think the other programs have the ability to buy more lottery tickets, but what you're outlining right now is a strike against JD. So we can move on to the basketball because there's new exciting vibes there. And I know you guys have covered this ad nauseum. No one's covered it better than Pete. Pete, I know that you've always been careful around the boozer stuff, but I haven't had the opportunity in several days to ask you over the air. This is what the internet is abuzz about right now when it comes to Miami men's basketball. All sorts of internet sleuthing being done, all sorts of questions being asked about post. So what can you tell us about the elephant in the room, which is the guy that recruited the boozers to Duke, is now at Miami, and Miami finished, by all accounts, runner-up in that recruitment?
Well, I mentioned on the show the other day that it's been rumored also, obviously, that Columbus coach Andrew Moran is going to be joining staff. He was at the press conference the other day, which I didn't see that reported anywhere else. So I posted it on the board and I mentioned on the podcast, but that also seems significant here. Duke fans were all in the mentions the other day, quote tweeting us, calling us crazy because, you know, we put out the edit with a picture of the boozers with Jay Lucas's quote. But you and I were both at that press conference, right? I know there were some audio issues during the live video. So if you haven't gone back and watched it again, the first question that was asked to Jay Lucas was obviously a question about the boozers, right? Because he was asked if there were any, you know, Duke commits or signees that he, you know, had heard from since the news broke. And he said, I'm not going to comment on that, but we want to keep the best players home moving forward. I mean, who the heck is he talking about, right? To me, that was a very direct comment without mentioning them. And D, again, you were there in the building. Like you tell me if I was wrong on that. So I just don't think there's been, I keep saying better than 0% chance. This is not like something where I'm saying right now, man, this is up in the air right now. They're really like starting to trend towards Miami. That's not what I'm saying at all. But there's not been enough from people that I know, people who are closer to the situation than obviously us right here, sitting here. They're not saying no 100%. So that's what I'll say.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the question was pretty direct from Michelle Coughlin to him in the press conference, and obviously he couldn't say it because of compliance issues.
And there was laughs, by the way, right? Like it was
year.
A tense thing in the building. There were people sitting behind us. D, I'm not going to say who they were in the press conference.
Powerful people
are very important people, and were very important in the hire, and also have ties to the school that these young men attend. And there were big laughs in the building, and there was like a big kind of like sigh, not a sigh, but everyone knew what the question was about.
Just when you thought the laughs would subside, there were mass laughs.
Yeah, look at that. Bada bing.
So again, yeah, that's what I'll say on that. We'll track it here moving forward. Obviously, they have, I believe, in a few weeks here, they have the national championship tournament sort of thing. It's in the first week of April. So I don't think anything in terms of Columbus coach Andrew Moran will be official before that.
You mentioned another name on our socials, that a name that I actually recognize, because some in the audience may be familiar with my my blood feud with Terry Rozier, who I think is the worst basketball player arguably ever.
A great call. He is the worst.
Okay,
I'm
going to say laser focus here, but you invoked a name that I recognize, because when Terry Rozier for a season fooled everybody into thinking he wasn't the worst basketball player on the planet, he was working with Nick Friedman, who I actually know a little bit, and I was surprised to see Kane's Insight tweet about. I know he went to the University of Miami. I know just from his dealings with Terry Rozier, he has to be a good coach, because Terry Rozier is the worst player on the planet. So what's going on there?
Yeah, so first of all, in terms of the staff, Lucas said it the other day. It's a tricky situation for him right now because conference tournaments have started now, as we're well aware in our Onions chat. Mike, one of the best chats out there, our college basketball chat. But
business is about to pick up.
Yeah, it's it's been up and down all year, but we're ready to go. But Lucas said he's in contact with a bunch of people, and he has to kind of wait for the season to play out here. I based on what we've heard from the beginning, I do think there's going to be an NBA element to this staff, right? We understand his dad's ties in the NBA, but everything we've heard about Coach Lucas is he does a lot of stuff independently throughout the, in his own work. It's not stuff that his dad's just handing to him. And that name, Nick Friedman, that I mentioned, is a guy who was, because I think it's important you do still keeps, someone. I'm not saying you need someone from the current staff, but maybe someone who has been around Miami. Mm-hmm. And this is a guy in Friedman who was a GA in the Sweet 16 run, has been an assistant coach with the Hornets, associate head coach for the Haitian national team.
Yeah, worked on some good stuff.
And so he's a game planner, right? And he's a skills trainer guy. I think you need to bring in multiple, which a Moran is that sort of guy too. But you talked about, or Jay Lucas talked about, he said, I've been in contact with people from the grassroots level to the college level to the NBA level, right? So, and from what I understand, I believe they share an agent as well, those two. So there's always those back workings of,
can confirm,
of people who are kind of in that circle. But there's, I think names like that, you're going to see some NBA people. You're going to see some people who are maybe just on the recruiting and personnel side, so to speak. And I think he's going to bring in someone he said grassroots, and I know that's where he has a lot of his ties. His brother has his AAU team. You're going to see a whole scale operation built out.
Yeah, like I mentioned, I got to know Nick a little bit, and I know where his passion lies when it comes to the University of Miami basketball. And what I'm saying about Terry Rozier, that's not like he wasn't a developmental coach that just worked with the entire team and got to take credit for Terry Rozier's success there. No, that was his project. That was his assignment. He solely worked on Terry Rozier when Terry Rozier was a really good player for Charlotte. And
he was in charge of the replay, the challenges when with the Hornets too. So this, it's I want to bring people back who have been around the program to a certain extent. I obviously Lucas needs to bring his own flair, but I think it's important that I think it was awesome. Coach L was there, right? D, that was cool. Obviously, Coach Lucas shouted him out and thanked him for setting the foundation and said there wasn't much before you. I think Leonard Hamilton might have something to say about that. Leonard Hamilton did do some really good things.
Darius, I was wondering how Darius Rice
I was thinking the same thing as well, because listen, there was a solid foundation before that. Obviously, that was kind of
the foundation was totally
it was eroded by Perry Clark and Haith, but you know what I'm saying.
I think what's exciting about Nick is and you're totally right to invoke Leonard Hamilton, and I do actually want to give Leonard Hamilton his flowers a little bit later on, because I thought what happened at FSU was pretty interesting. But Nick was a part of the start of what ended up being Miami's glory days, and hopefully that's not something that we point to as a window that closed. I know this is more than a bump in the road. Miami became one of the worst major programs ever. I mean, we've been around some bad Miami basketball teams, and the last 2 years have been about as bad as you could anticipate. But Nick has his roots from where those glory days started, and it's good to have some history here with this staff. I agree.
Yeah, the question here from Juan Manuel Ventura, always with the thought-provoking questions. He said, how does an elephant emoji, peanut emoji, in a room behave? Who came up with that saying? Juan Manuel, I believe that this saying is not about the elephant's behavior, but its sheer size in the room. So if you ignore an animal with that kind of size, you're missing what everybody else is thinking about, because there's a giant elephant in the room with the potential to trample those in the room when he gets moving. So I think that is the origin of the phrase.
Actually, dates back to 19th century Russia, and its origin was in a fable called The Inquisitive Man.
Huh? Yeah. Russia. I didn't know they had elephants.
Mm-hmm. But it was in a fable, and that's the first known origin there. Like I do want to come back to the Leonard Hamilton.
I want to come back to the African animals. So you go back and read history, there's a lot of animals that are from Africa and Asia that you see them in weird places historically. So I'll give you an example, Mike.
Yeah, this is going to be good for the AFCON.
There were a lot of monkeys in New England and in the original colonies back in the day. Mm-hmm. In fact, Prohibition, one of the reasons it started is the father of Prohibition, when he was a lad, was forced to fight a monkey by a couple of drunks, and he fought the monkey.
What type of monkey?
Good question. I don't know.
I mean,
it wasn't a gorilla.
When you say monkey, like those are smaller.
Are
we talking about a chimp? Because that would be a tough fight.
I mean, this was like a 12-year-old boy, so it's got to be something that he could evenly match with.
12-year-old boy, depending on how strong he is against a chimp, I take the chimp.
Now that we got this, he had a great quote about this bout. So I got to find it. But
you want me to fill while?
No, I'll get it.
I had no idea that there were monkeys in the Prohibition era of New England.
Okay, so here we go. Here's the quote. This is from Neil Dow, the father of Prohibition. He wrote this in 1898 about when he was a young man, what made him be so anti-alcohol. He said the drunks made him fight a monkey. And he said, this is his quote, "Not old enough to realize the absurdity of such a match, or to understand that there were only bites and scratches to be had, and no good of any kind, or even so-called honor to be won from the scrimmage, I permitted myself to be armed with a stout stick furnished by one of the men, and entered the territory where the monkey intended to be supreme. To such a monkey as I then encountered, it is wise to give a wide berth," athletic stance. He opened the fight with teeth and claw, jumping at my face, biting at me, and tearing my clothes with all his considerable might. I kept him in front of me as well as I could, kicking and striking him in front of me as well as I could, kicking and striking him whenever I got the chance. How long the folly lasted, I do not know. For what seemed to me a long time, the monkey had most of the fun and I had most of the pain. But at length, the brute got tired of it and knew enough to give up. So the human, in this case, the human adolescent was able to outlast the monkey in the battle, in case you were wondering how these things might go hypothetically, just with endurance. But then he gets the upper hand. Now he's pounding the monkey. So here's what he said. Before I had thrashed the monkey soundly as I wished, I was called off and came out of the yard bitten, scratched, bloody, and dirty from head to foot, and with clothes torn. But I was so petted and rewarded with candy and round cakes by the rascally bystanders, these are the drunks, who had put me up to the fight, that I imagined myself quite a hero until taking a great deal of dirt, some of the blood, and all the scratches home with me, I found much to my comfort that my parents took a very different view of the affair than those of the barbershop loafers. So that monkey fight in I believe Delaware, or maybe it was Maine, in Maine, led to Prohibition and all the social changes that came with it. So there were monkeys in America back in the day, more than you think.
Leonard Hamilton, storied career along the state of Florida. Somehow botched it with Michael Jordan. But I will say maybe two good things came out of COVID, which was the Boneyard match between AJ Styles and Undertaker.
Yep.
Clearly, Pete agrees. And the other good thing that came out of it was
FSU not winning the
FSU probably not winning a national championship, or it's certainly a Final Four appearance during that year that we lost the NCAA tournament. And COVID really undid everything. It would seem like NIL, which also happened around a similar time, added some complexities because FSU is a total mess. And what's happened there at with FSU's basketball program and NIL, D, you could speak with more authority on that. It really, unfortunately, puts a sour taste in everybody's mouth. But I've always loved and respected Leonard Hamilton because that guy, you want to talk about building something out of nothing. Dire place that Miami basketball was in before Leonard Hamilton arrived. He made it matter. He made it so that they could get out of the Miami arena. This was a program that was playing inside the James L. Knight Center for a long time. And he got everybody to buy into the point that you have Watsco on campus. Like, he built that program. And I never rooted against him, ever. Even at FSU, I wanted to beat FSU, but I always liked and respected and revered Leonard Hamilton, the coach. He recruited some great body types that would always give Miami fits. An absolute legend. If he won that national championship, you could honestly talk about this guy as a Hall of Fame basketball coach. An incredible head coach. Didn't get to see it through because Michael Jordan came calling, but probably would have gotten Miami to a Final Four. Who knows if he would have stayed at Miami that entire time? You're talking about a legendary run potentially down here. So I wanted to pay our respects to Leonard Hamilton, even though he did end his career in Tallahassee.
Yeah, he did. Towards the end, he was really recruiting at a high level. Talking about NBA players. I mean, Florida State was putting out a lot of NBA players. Didn't have the same,
lot of 7-footers, man.
Yeah,
didn't have the same amount of NBA players in Miami, but just good teams that kind of were better than the sum of their parts, or that were the whole was better than the sum of its parts with Leonard Hamilton. So yeah, great coach. Certainly much closer to Coach L than anybody that came in between those two. Yeah, it's an interesting what if this guy didn't lead to the Washington Wizards and he got this, because Leonard Hamilton also had to deal with the arena situation, which was terrible. Miami Arena for UM basketball was horrible. I went to those games. It was not it was a terrible atmosphere because it was too big.
It got good for like whenever St. John's came to town,
right?
And
UConn.
Those were some iconic games, and you actually had a good raucous atmosphere, which was like total unforeseen thing down here
for sure. But you put that in the SCO, it's a whole different animal. It's just he had a lot to
Convocation Center.
Yeah, he had a lot to overcome, and he did. So shout out to Leonard Hamilton and a good riddance to him at FSU. Speaking of baseball, that was a really good baseball team too. In retrospect, for the Canes, that was a downside of COVID. They probably could have made some noise that year with the team that they had. But yeah, Bloodline also came out of COVID. That was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it's still going on.
6th inning.
I've been long soured. I mean, we'll get into wrestling a little bit later on in the show. Any football thoughts before we actually get into some of the more popcorn aspects of what it is that we do over here? Any other animals from the Dark Continent that you want to get into?
No animals. But as far as the football team, I think the big transition now, the big thing to watch is the rest of spring and just the rest of camp. Now that I've seen this team a little bit, is can this defense become an unselfish unit under Heatherman? And that's not to say, I heard the character of the room is great. The athleticism of the room is great. I think this is a team that over the past few years, you can go back to the end of Manny as well, even the good times of Manny, quite frankly. It's all about, making the play, running around blocks, and not necessarily being physical and unselfish. I think Heatherman's defense is very straightforward. You're not going to see the same kind of jumps, that's the stunts, the loops, just kind of all that movement that you saw Reese jumping around.
When they call zone, will they know actually how to play zone?
We'll see the communication aspect, but just in terms of the D-line movement, I think you will see a lot less of that. But you got to beat the guy in front of you. And at times, you're going to have to be unselfish. Maybe you're not going to get the sack, but you're going to play it a certain way that other people can get the sack. And I think that is what the goal is of this defense, to be fast, physical. It's not like D'Onofrio, super complicated two-gap defensive line patty cake. You are not going to see that. It's just not what this personnel is built for at the University of Miami. But I think you do want to kind of deprogram some of the getting around blocks, finesse, sacrificing the defense to make a play as opposed to making a play just by killing the guy in front of you, which I think is what Miami is trying to get back to.
Thank goodness, because stunting along the line made running out wide so effective for opposing teams. I'm pretty certain that we could devise an offensive game plan that would have gave Miami fits if we had enough talent. It was like why it was a fireable offense, what Wake Forest did to decide to try to attack Miami up the gap. That's not how you do that. Miami would often strategically and tactically take their players out of the space where they could make a play.
Imagine Miami going against Miami. Imagine Miami trying to stop Miami last year with how many weapons Miami, our offense was so balanced.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh, it would have been ugly.
It would have been real ugly. And by the way, it was real ugly with teams half as talented as Miami. It was bad. Let's not harken on so much on the past, but communication was an issue. Stubbornness was an issue from a DC. From what I've had the opportunity to speak to our new DC, I think there is alignment there that wasn't there before. There were communication issues among the coaches before. I think you're going to see a lot more cohesion for the staff despite the turnover.
Yeah, I think you're right. I hope you're right. Right, it's hard to know because
there's quite a bit of turnover.
Right, and these guys are not coming together. But look, I thought last year one of the things I was wrong about. We all knew that secondary was going to be a talent deficient unit relative to where it needed to be, right? We knew there were issues on defense. I did not expect the communication to be so poor when you had Guidry and Chevis Jackson from the same tree. I mean, he coached under Guidry at Marshall, and then you had even though you didn't have guys necessarily experienced in that system, you did have Deani Hill. You had older players, Mish Powell, Ivy League 24-year-old, right? So that to me was a surprise that you had so many communication issues with the continuity on paper. So look, we had communication issues with Adai and Steele on paper, and they had 4 NFL DBs. In practice, and they had 4 NFL DBs. So what the answer is to get better communication, I don't know, because both times, whether it was an all-star staff or kind of bringing 2 guys as a package, neither one of them worked. So we'll see what we can do to get this defense on the same page. It's going to take some time, but Heatherman did a great job in Minnesota. We'll see where it goes.
What excites me about Heatherman so much, because I'll talk myself into any new coach over here. I'll only see the good in it. I'm starting to get a little bit jaded by that, but I do like the Schiano ties because we know working for Mario is not easy. I think Heatherman knows what he's getting into there. I think personality-wise, it's a better match than Guidry was with Mario. That being said, it worked plenty well in year 1 for Guidry, but I do think some stubbornness, some lack of awareness of talent deficiencies that they had got in the way. I don't think Heatherman will have the same kind of miscommunications with the head coach, given that he's kind of been born in the fire a little bit, and the educational background, being able to reach the players and communicate. It seemed to be an issue last year. Whenever we tried to play a more conservative style on defense, it would end up blowing up in our face every single time out. So if you tell me those two things, this guy knows how to work with someone like Mario because he learned at the knee of Greg Schiano, and PJ Fleck is not a walk in the park either. And the fact that he's an educator, those are huge attributes, I think, going forward. And let's be real. Miami addressed the talent deficiencies when it comes to that secondary. There's a game of musical chairs going on right now. Who knows how the spring transfer window is going to shake out, because there are absolute position battles happening right now in Coral Gables.
No question. And the secondary, I've seen enough just with the first week of practice. Talent level there has increased tremendously, regardless of what the defensive coordinator does. That's going to be an improvement on paper, just talent wise. Seeing these guys move around. I mean, you talk about top 3 DBs potentially of Lucas, Frederic, and Ethan O'Connor, with Charles Brantley being a very experienced option, Emmanuel Carnley with his length. I think that's just a majorly improved group. We'll see Damari Brown, how he can fit in here. But I'm excited about the defense.
I want to swing it over to Pete real quick on some NFL draft stuff. Also, I want to pick your brain because I know that you were always plugged in on the Houston Texans. I understand getting a lot of picks for Laramie Tunsil. Miami Dolphins fans know all about that and the benefits that could bring. For Washington, you can understand why they're getting Laramie Tunsil. You want to protect your young quarterback. Why isn't Houston protecting its young quarterback? Because that was the issue.
Oh, they are, baby. They got the best left tackle in the league, Titus Howard. He's going to be playing left tackle, it looks like. So this is a great thing for the Titus Howard team, man.
All right.
This is a wonderful thing.
I think they need more along that line, especially the interior of the line, which was a disaster.
They also just
made another trade.
They traded Kenyon Green, which was their first round pick a couple years ago at guard, and he got traded for Chauncey Gardner Johnson's going to be an interesting locker room over there. But no, man, I think that they're going to really bring in some other guys on the line, but it looks like Titus can play left tackle. So
that one was just for me because I was curious, because I know you're dialed in there, but I did want to go into Pro Canyons.
By the way, that was a complete surprise. No one knew that was coming.
It was a pretty shocking move.
Yeah.
Before we get to the Pro Canyons, we missed this comment from Ghost in the Bond Dial. He said Terry Rozier bet on the monkey and lost.
There is some pretty damning evidence out there. Terry cannot be throwing up these performances with the weight of the world on his shoulders and the investigation lights swinging overhead. So, again, I'm not going to get sidetracked. Damien Martinez seems to be skyrocketing up every week on people's draft boards. D, you nailed it. I gave you your flowers last week on that. Procane's on the move. Braxton Berrios. Houston, right? Houston. Well. All right, so good for the Texans over there. How are some of these Procane's evals going throughout this process? Is there anybody that's setting themselves apart throughout this workout process? And it seems more and more steam is headed in the direction of Cam Ward going number 1 overall.
First, Pete, I sent the tweet to the private chat. Pull it up because it goes to my Damien Martinez comment. I think Damien Martinez, to me, look, the guy is obviously a big physical back. You're not going to find more physical film than what you saw from Damien Martinez.
Nice NFL body.
Oh, I mean, I've interviewed him. I sat next to him. The guy's a big dude, man. He's not like one of these guys that's just like jacked up, like beyond his frame. He's a big frame, and he plays big. You saw he was the best in the country as far as breaking tackles.
Listen, that's why I kept highlighting what Jonathan Taylor said about him when I talked to him last year for the podcast that I did with him. Like Jonathan Taylor, who's one of the best backs in the league and a physical stud in his own right, like was wide-eyed about Damien Martinez having worked out with him. And D, not to cut into what you were saying, but I think a lot of this stuff, Mike, when it comes to guys moving up boards in the media's eyes, is catching up to what the NFL like. The NFL is always liked Damien Martinez. Now, was he going to be a first, second, third round pick? I don't know that was going to be the case, just because you want to have that like dynamic game breaking ability that I'm not sure he has that.
That's also just not how the position is drafted.
Right. So, but either way, I think fourth round, fifth round, pretty. It's
a good job. He probably could have done better. And occasionally, like every 10 days, I text Kevin Clark about the Syracuse loss. And I think that the greater Miami chat just still doesn't get what happened there. And how bad that was. You guys just moved on and bought your Pop-Tart Bowl merch thinking that it was all good when it was kind of a betrayal. But I do think, look, Damien Martinez was a totally different back at the end of the season. And he was a back that you could trust. He was running at a high clip. His body was in better shape. And I know there were circumstances that led to him being not at the weight he wanted to be, not being as fast. Like the guy was basically running in Timberlands when he first got here. He wasn't super explosive. And by the end of the year, he was a back that could wear people down and even pull away. I feel like if he got to a better start in Miami probably trusts him more. And they trusted him fine by the end. But if you look at what happened in that Syracuse game with him running 6.5 yards per clip and still wanting to put the ball in Cam Ward's hands, maybe trying to also win him a Heisman, when all you had to do to win him a Heisman was win that freaking game. I will always look at Damien Martinez as a guy that did a great job in turning that season around. But for me, it's still a larger what-if conversation because we got off to a really unimpressive start down here and it was unexpected.
I think he was adjusting to the offense. The running scheme was just different. The way he was lining up, the way he was attacking the line was a different type of running game than what he had at Oregon State. So I think that was really the adjustment. I pulled up that athletic score earlier. Pete that's 126 out of almost 2,000 running backs since 1987. So he's in pretty high company there as far as his athletic performance. He did lose some weight over the course of the year, but I think really
he lost 10 pounds according to him,
and which is not uncommon. You'd be surprised how much guys' weight fluctuates. Not just because
but what he said was that was his normal playing weight, what he got down to. So he did admit that he was overweight at the start of the season.
Yeah, man, look,
and there were mitigating circumstances that contributed to that. Like he came cross country, he got a late start to things.
I saw him in the scrimmage we talked about on the show.
Yeah,
go 75 yards, just like he did against Iowa State. Probably even better. Actually.
So you're giving voice more towards it wasn't necessarily a physical thing. It was about an adjustment to the offense.
We also found out that didn't mean much against our defense last year.
Yeah, that's very true.
But I think we talk about that game in particular, Syracuse, and we're still talking about here in March because it was obviously a historically bad game. There's some of the trust you have in Cam Ward, or some of the it's not necessarily, hey, we're calling plays for Cam Ward because we want to get him a Heisman. Cam Ward was running the show at that point because he was the best player in the country.
And he had a very good game.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. Should we have ran more in retrospect? Yes, 100% we should have. But you'll see this with Peyton Manning. You'll see this with Tom Brady. I mean, the great quarterbacks, they're going to put the game in their hands, and he had a lot of chances. I mean, there was fumbles that had nothing to do with Cam Ward. There were drops by Isaiah Horton, which had nothing to do with Cam Ward.
Yeah.
There were personal foul penalties.
Phantom holds on a long run that took away a long run from Damien Martinez. There were a lot of things that went wrong in that game.
And the defense was
it was a horror show because they stopped getting home on the quarterback. And once they stopped getting home on the quarterback, McCord picked them apart. That game will always stay with me because I've said it ad nauseum. Last year should have felt better to us. Yeah. We lost 2 games and we barely lost them, and we got shut out of an expanded playoff. It's really disappointing, but I look back to that Syracuse game and I think, man, if we just kept pounding the rock, we could have changed the math a little bit. It was a little scary because it was a 21-0 lead. Miami was getting home on the quarterback. Miami essentially stops himself on one drive when it's 21-7. And the way that the math was working out in the first half, Syracuse, you knew that they were going to get it to 21-14 because Miami stopped getting pressure, and you knew Syracuse was getting the ball back to start the second half, and you knew that game was going to be 21-all if Miami didn't keep scoring. And I think what could have helped Miami score more because the big mistakes that you outlined were from the wide receivers. It had nothing to do with Cam Ward. Cam Ward delivered good footballs in those instances. Why are the wide receivers being forced to make plays when he got a 6.5 yard per clip running back there? What if? But this is all to give Damien Martinez credit for putting himself in position to kind of wash off some of what was on him at the start of the season when I flatly said he's not the best running back in this backfield. And quite frankly, the staffs agreed because what actually got Damien Martinez going was him getting kind of benched. Well, bench is not accurate, but the snaps definitely decreased. It started with that Louisville game,
right?
And that's when you saw a different. Yeah, that's when you saw a different Damien Martinez. It finally got through. He wore teams down. He wasn't looking good in that game in the early going, and then his big body, his speed, his better grip of the offense, and where the holes were going to be. That helped Miami salt that game away, and that's what I kind of wanted to see against Syracuse, and we just flatly didn't.
Yeah, no, he would have ran. He did run against Syracuse, when he had the chance. So I'm with you on that. I think Martinez is a stud. It's a very good running back draft. So I think that's going to impact how far some of these guys, where they go.
No doubt.
But I think in terms of the player, he's better than Gus Edwards, and Gus Edwards had a really nice NFL career. I'd love the Dolphins to pick him. I'm a Dolphins fan. I just think that's a fit. We need a guy like that. I think he could run well in this offense, put the fullback in front of him, let him do some of those kind of stretch plays. I think he can do it more than he did at Miami, more like he did at Oregon State. So
how do you feel about Tua's new body type?
He's never been that ripped, His head is hard. We know that. Let's talk about this, because I hadn't thought about this until right now. In WWE, it is very well known that Samoans have the hardest heads in the sport.
It's canon.
It is canon. Every Samoan has a very powerful headbutt, man or female. Tua in the NFL has not had a hard head.
Yeah. It makes me think that maybe wrestling isn't totally real.
I mean, I've always, there's certain stereotypes that wrestling sets out. Like, I just assume Mexicans are very good at jumping and flying. We'll talk about that a little later in the show.
They can work the ropes, no doubt.
But to know this about Samoans, that the head durability is not real, that's a blow. That really hurts my ability to watch the product now, knowing that they're in fact weaker in the head perhaps than average.
No, this shakes me to my very core, thinking that everything that I saw with the head shrinkers, the Wild Samoans, Umaga, even the Usos, who are known to deliver a headbutt or two, although they have really fallen in love with super kicks to a really agitating degree. Yeah, all that stuff. Really, The Rock, who had the football background, he was the only one that didn't really want to deliver a blow to the head. Maybe he knew the real truth, which is this is overblown, the strength of our skulls.
Yeah, he's also only half Samoan. Maybe only has half of the Samoan head. His head's only half good. But this is.
They also have very strong thumbs.
Oh yeah.
Samoan
Solo,
spikes.
Umaga.
Tua should actually do that. Like, just tape up his thumb. I'd pop for that.
I think he's had a thumb injury too.
Just tape it up. If he's had a thumb injury, then everything we know about Samoans and wrestling canon is false.
But we'll see the body. I mean, Mahomes, didn't exactly, win Mr. Olympia when he had the.
No, that's why Tom Brady. It's why Tom Brady is going to always be the GOAT, because I am betting on Mahomes not aging with the same kind of grace. I mean, he's still getting around the corner. He's still making big runs, but you're saying that dad bod's just going to get more and more daddy.
Tom Brady was never really. Tom Brady's probably more ripped now that he's not playing than when he's playing.
He was in better shape in his 40s than he was in his 20s, and then he was in his 30s. Like, I don't know if Pat Mahomes has ever displayed that kind of off-season discipline. Maybe he's chasing the GOAT, so maybe that'll actually register with him. But I am actually worried about how Patrick Mahomes and his approach is going to age.
It's interesting you brought up Tom Brady. This applies more towards Damien Martinez than Tua, because it's about in season, which is Brady always said it was hard to keep on his diet in season because of the flights and the stress and like just the certainty of the schedule. So he said his weight would always fluctuate during the season too, just to the Damien Martinez point. These guys, their weight does change quite a bit, especially college kids.
As someone that's gone to Lake Tahoe for several years, I can tell you the offseason is an issue for Patrick Mahomes and his approach to it. And look, the season is not as long as the offseason, so do with that what you will. But exciting news for Damien Martinez. I think he's going to be able to contribute in the NFL right away. It seems like Xavier Restrepo is going to be the same kind of case. A lot of interesting fits out there in the NFL for him and his skill set, and he's impressing a lot of people with his interviews. Not really a surprise there. Saying the right things. He's always been good doing that in front of the mic. Doing the right things on the field, certainly when that game kicks off. He has the right approach there too. Is there anybody else that might be a surprise that might be taken a little bit earlier that you're hearing, Pete?
I mean, I think that a lot of Canes fans think this guy is an undrafted player, and we've said for a while that he's going to get drafted by Sam Brown, a wide receiver, just because he didn't put up a great year by the numbers, and just certain moments where people weren't very happy. People being the fans weren't very happy with effort and stuff like that. But the way he tested as we expected him to, I think it's going to get him drafted, and someone's going to take a chance on him as a receiver with big time traits. Now,
and he had much better tape at his previous school.
Yeah, and I think it'll probably be, 5th, 6th round. But I think a lot of people were expecting him to be undrafted, as we've said all year. He'd be a guy who got picked. Now, not going to get picked as high as he really could have gone because the tape was not consistent. But
do you think Jacoby George gets drafted? I mean,
yes.
He's pretty speedy. Where do you think he goes?
7th, similar range, probably.
Yeah, 6th, 7th.
I could see the case for Sam Brown getting drafted over Jacoby George, honestly. And I think that you can apply context to Sam Brown and say look at that offense. Or Cam did a great job of spreading the ball around a little bit. And I do think that Sam did some good things in the offense that I know from doing weeks of shows when we were trying to figure out what was going on with Sam Brown. Like, he was an effective downfield blocker. Miami had good blocking receivers, actually, down here. And I do think that while we want to see the big explosive plays, that's what we were expecting. NFL GMs in their evaluation, when you get to that 5th, 6th round, they're looking for downfield blockers. They're looking for guys that can make contributions on special teams. And that is a skill set that can replicate itself on the special team side of the ball. So I do think that Sam Brown, you can make a case. I could see a scenario very easily now after hearing Pete out where Sam Brown goes ahead of Jacoby George.
Yeah, because it's not like George has a perfect track record in terms of he had better production than him. He was more consistent than Brown, but it's not like he's a perfect prospect either.
Look at this is how good the chat is here. If you're not part of the live chat here, Canes Insight, you're missing out. I mean, look at this here. So good question from Juan Manuel Ventura. Was Jimmy Superfly Snuka Samoan flag emoji? Then Ghost and Yvonne Donaldson. I think he was Fijian from the island of Fiji. Yeah, which is correct.
He would also use the headbutt, famously Madison Square Garden off the top cage. But keep in mind, one of his most notorious angles, he got cracked over the skull with a coconut.
True, didn't take it
well.
So it didn't
we've
cross
been lied
islands.
to, but again, it's from Fiji.
Yeah, it didn't cross islands. And then Ghost and Yvonne Donaldson. Look at this pleasantries. So Juan Manuel Ventura says, thank you for telling me that Snuka was from Fiji. Goes from Devon Donaldson, Fiji flag, thumbs up emoji, as he knows that Juan
speaking
Manuel
the language
loves emojis.
Speaking of the language of Juan Manuel over there. All right. You guys want to get into some wrestling?
Let's do it. Wrestling.
Yeah. Wait, real quick. The draft. Pete, you know this because you were on the shows with me. Tyler Shuck. Non-Canes. After we played him, I said, if this guy went to Georgia or Alabama, we would be talking about Tyler Shuck as a high round draft pick. I'm not going to make the prediction yet.
Isn't Mario a quarterback killer, though?
That was Mario recruit. That's right.
Isn't Mario a quarterback killer? He can't recruit quarterbacks. You go there to die.
He's plotting his next show next week.
Seriously.
You get to take credit for that one,
too. Lincoln Riley. But Tyler Shuck, watch where he goes in the draft. Maybe I'm wrong. But I think Tyler Shuck's going to go a lot earlier than people think. I think if you ask me to compare him to like a Quinn Ewers, I think Shuck is better than Ewers, in my opinion.
Well, Ewers would have dove for that ball against Miami.
Oh, that was a good play by Popo.
Yeah, but this is where Shuck kind of lost me a little bit. He was pretty good.
Some sick throws. He had a throw in that Notre Dame game. Was that the week before they played us or a couple weeks before? And it was.
No, he's a good player. He's a good hand. But like, I made a character assessment on him not diving for that loose ball in Louisville.
Our like. The chat and our audience for this show is so good. They know the transitions before we even get to them. Here's Ghost and Devon Donaldson. How about some croquetas, Gary's favorite midnight snack? Let's talk about the #1 Cuban restaurant on the planet, which is now conveniently located right there in the heart of Miami in the Dayland Mall, the Dayland Dining Pavilion. That is Islas Canarias Express. 7 different types of croquetas. We're overdue for a lunch.
I had 4 Islas croquetas on Sunday. I had my dad over for dinner after the NASCAR race. He had vaca frita. My wife had vaca frita de pollo, which is really good, sensational. I had the masa de puerco. I practice what I preach.
How was the dinner?
Fantastic, dude. Like the mariquitas, the mojo that they have with the mariquitas is perfect. I like getting a little mojo on the mariquita and then scooping up the black beans and rice with that right there. It's a perfect
delicate
bite.
Delicate. It's hard. It breaks sometimes. You got to be kind of
not the Islas mariquitas.
These are the sturdy. Yeah. These are some sturdy mariquitas at Islas Canarias Cuban Express. They got the classics. They got the new generation, right? They got the cubaritos, which is not necessarily a Cuban dish, but it's got Cuban ingredients and it's easy to grab and go. They got stuff for the kids. They got all kinds of desserts. The #1 Cuban restaurant on planet Earth. You see the shirt, Croqueta County. If you like the merch, also croquetacounty.com. They got all that. Always get a lot of compliments on the shirt. People love it. Yeah. Islas Canarias Express. Croqueta
Great job.
County.
I do want to answer 2 questions. Well, 1 question and a comment in the chat. Simeon Barrow. I thought he was really impressive as a Miami Hurricane football player, but the NFL people that I've been talking to, the body type isn't desirable, right, for him, which is a shame. But he was a good player for Miami, and hopefully he gets some look-sees and gets the opportunity to do what some other players did, which is really make an impact and make a squad with some reps in the preseason. I know you're a big fan of a player that made the most of his opportunity in Leonard Taylor, Pete.
Well, I mean, listen, looks like he's going to be on the 53 again this year. Juan Manuel says Cuban sandwich, 12 croquetas and beer, the ultimate happy meal. 12 croquetas. Wow.
12 croquetas. I compliment you on your guts. The comment that I wanted to acknowledge is a Miami Hurricane.
Pete, pull up the tweet.
Former
it's
football,
on the private chat.
A former Miami Hurricane football player made the WWE Hall of Fame, and it is not Dwayne Johnson. Dwayne Johnson, not the first Miami Hurricane football player to make it to the Hall of Fame. I think we've tied FSU football players now in the WWE Hall of Fame. The narcissist Lex Luger in WWE, but the total package in WCW, Lex Luger has made the WWE Hall of Fame. If you're not familiar with his story, it is tragic. It is sad. It is great to see where he is right now. His ownership of his past mistakes, his testimony. I know he's found religion. He's become a beacon in the community. And I know it was controversial to put him into the Hall of Fame because some people may not be able to get over what happened with Miss Elizabeth and his reputation in the 90s in particular. He's a changed man. And I am really glad that he gets to be around to actually see this. Also, the Warrior Award needs to be renamed for DDP.
Oh, yeah.
Because Warrior had a bunch of stuff going on too. DDP has been a godsend to retired professional wrestlers, active professional wrestlers. What he's doing, it's not just the yoga, it's not just a fitness regimen. He's taking people into his home, deeply caring for them, knowing what this industry did to people back when it was Wild West a little bit. That guy is a saint.
Yeah, this should have been a wrestler of the week. I didn't even think about Lex Luger.
Assad says joining the show as y'all talk about food during Ramadan was cruel.
Yeah, and pork too.
Man.
Sorry,
Assad.
and pork too. I had the masa support. I'm very sorry.
DDP, man, he's one of those guys that looked old when he was young. So now that he's old, he looks great. He's in great shape.
That's a secret to aging. But also, when he was young, he was old. When that guy was damn near 40 when he finally got pushed in WCW because he had failed as like a valet. Like there's an old WrestleMania where Honky Tonk Man is driving to the ring. The driver is DDP. The guy's been in the industry forever. And it was only until late that he decided, let me give wrestling a try again.
I love, I saw an interview with DDP and they asked for like one of his big innovations of the sport. And he said that he transitioned valets to when they were just like sweet looking to being stripper hot, in his words. That was one of his big innovations, was making that transition. And I think he succeeded in that as an ECW fan.
Biggest innovation, I think, was the finisher that's become an all-time finisher and repackaged and probably perfected by Randy Orton. But the Diamond Cutter was a great finisher. Man, DDP had some absolute bangers in WCW. I may reserve him for a wrestler of the week because he had the program with Raven was an all-timer. He did some really good work.
Randy Savage, they had a pretty good one.
Awesome stuff. Yeah. Like the mid-card in WCW was really, really strong. And that takes me to what I want to talk about in AEW, which was one of their strong suits when they really got cooking during that pandemic where WWE fell off and AEW was, I think, pretty irrefutably the superior product during the pandemic era. They did such a great job with structuring their card that you cared about every storyline, which was something that WCW Nitro did when they took over the Monday Night Wars for a little bit. My wrestler of the week is an AEW wrestler. Gotta give the proper respect to Mariah May, who I did some digging today, and I was not really all that familiar with her story. To me, I knew that she came over from Japan and Stardom, and that I knew I'd followed her on Instagram for quite a while. Very attractive young lady. And this story that she told with Toni Storm, which I think, by the way, as a table setter, Mariah May had this incredible match with Toni Storm at the most recent pay-per-view, AEW Revolution. It was a bloody mess. It was a proper blow-off to a great rivalry and story that didn't exactly have its hooks in me in the early going. Kind of thought I was into it at the beginning and then it had lulled and the matches weren't quite delivering. And then by the end, they have one of the most brutal matches in the history of women's professional wrestling. It should have closed the show. And it made me a Toni Storm. I've been a Toni Storm fan for quite a while. And I think you can make an argument 2024, she was the biggest, most successful, most over women's personality. But what do you do with that?
No.
Okay, well, certainly in AEW.
Yeah, Rhea Ripley.
And I know people have it like...
Rhea Ripley.
Fair enough, 100%. walking that back.
AEW for sure.
Tony Storm in the conversation though, a
Great
dumb,
gimmick.
But a gimmick that was kind of polarizing a little bit. People,
Risky.
Yeah, very risky, very dumb. The way that they intertwined it with Mariah May as being a super fan and then taking Tony's old gimmick and then betraying Tony. It was a great long story, but it needed to have a proper blow-off match, a bloody war like they had on Sunday in Los Angeles. The biggest mistake, and there have been many in the last few months from AEW, having that go in like the middle of the card and not close the show out with what will, I think, be an iconic image in women's wrestling history, with Tony in an embrace with Mariah. They've told this wonderful story. They're both a bloody mess as it coincides with the release of Queen of the Ring, a major motion picture that focuses on women's wrestling. I just became an immediate fan. I hadn't seen it with her until recently. And you know who else didn't see it with her? The WWE.
Yeah.
She was a part of NXT UK, had several tryouts, was coached by William Regal. They didn't see it with her. And she is so stunningly beautiful that she must have been really bad in the ring. She is not bad in the ring anymore. She's quite good. And she proved that on Sunday with some of the vicious bumps that she was taking there. It's a testament to hard work, remaking yourself, which is something that she did a lot, despite people not knowing. She's kind of held steady at AEW, which is where most people were first made aware of her. But she has reinvented herself quite a bit. She has traveled the world, really worked at her craft, spent a big amount of time in Pakistan wrestling there. I was really impressed with Mariah May's story, and I want to make sure to give her proper respect, because I think with that match on Sunday, she has catapulted herself into an upper tier of women's wrestlers right now. She was dynamite. Tony Storm, it's probably going to be remembered for Tony Storm and her story, because this is really still her moment. But Mariah May, who's very young, in her 20s, I think she's just 26 years old, entering the prime of her career in a couple of years. Don't be surprised if she probably makes a jump over to WWE based off the work here. She made a lot of money for herself on Sunday with that performance, and it should have been the main event.
Yeah, that was a great tidbit. I didn't know that about Pakistan. I've been dying. I'm a big proponent of women bleeding in wrestling rings. I just want to see more of it in WWE. They deserve it. They've been working hard.
Text I just received. Why did I put on CIS Live and D Money's reading Monkey Shakespeare?
That was a real quote, man. I'm trying to give you guys a history lesson about this country, right? And pivotal events in the development of this nation. And, you know, I get that kind of pushback.
Don't worry. If you miss it, it'll definitely be the social clip.
There you go.
Yeah. I did not know this either. I did a deep dive on Mariah May. That match made me want to learn more about her. And I was floored to see that WWE on multiple occasions said no thanks.
Crazy. And they could use more. They could always use more women. It is not.
Oh, so I'll give you my wrestler of the week.
Let's
now,
go.
Man, because
Let's
you
go.
want more women. We're going to go with the Dark Angel, Stephanie Vaquer. She's been a star all over the world for years, winning titles at every promotion she's been at. But finally, she's at NXT. Huge match last night for both women's titles, North American Championship, which she already held, and the NXT Women's Championship. Great match. And now we go again at WrestleMania this weekend as the double champ and the face of NXT.
Who's feeding you this stuff?
It is amazing.
I'm a researcher, man. I'm a researcher.
Stephanie Vaquer.
I'm a researcher.
That's presently my favorite right now. That's good work out of you. A champ.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, you know,
Chilean.
She actually was my wrestler of the week a month ago, but in honor of her winning 2 titles, she gets 2 wrestlers of the week, courtesy of the encyclopedia, Peter Reeves. Man, so timely. What I love about the best, first of all, best gimmick going in Kane's media, but what I love most about it is the timeliness. It could not be more timely and on point than what a Reeves.
He loves NXT on Tuesdays.
Best
like he is NXT's number one fan. It is so fresh on his mind. I love that you clear the lane, Pete. It will always make me laugh. But I also happen to know that you're not doing a gimmick and you actually love professional wrestling.
Yes.
And developmental professional wrestling is one of your many passions.
Yes. I love developmental sports in general.
She's got a great look, doesn't she? It's going to be super marketable. It's going to be tough to see when she gets a main roster call up because of the language barrier. I know she's working on that, but she's got a look. She's got a gimmick that I think works. Right. She's got a move set that I know makes Booker T pop.
Io Sky is going to be the main event, so you can't get there without the language.
She does have a natural charisma that I think Vaquer needs to kind of get there, but her gimmick AIDS her. Io Sky doesn't really have a gimmick.
Okay, Pete.
Kane's Cat Seat said, "This man Lex Luger got cut from our team. Don't mention him again as a hurricane, please."
He made it to the pros.
Yeah, come on.
He
man.
made it to the pros.
Hey, I will claim Lex Luger.
It was the 80s.
Come on.
Come
Kane.
on.
Cat, you weren't even born yet, man. You weren't even a thought yet.
Don't claim Lex Luger. Lex Luger would randomly beat Hollywood Hogan when he was a super heel like once a year clean in a torture rack.
Torture rack, best move to do to your children because it doesn't actually hurt. It's very safe.
Oh, you can make it hurt.
They're easy to get up. You
make
could make it hurt. Exactly. If you need to put a little pressure to kind of teach them a lesson on certain life lessons, you can squeeze a little bit down, but you can also do it kind of safely. So torture rack, really good move for your kids.
Don't forget about the forearm.
Martin Dubé saying, why does Mr. Ryan look more Cuban than D-Money? It's the chain. It's the Mark Zuckerberg rebrand of Mike Ryan. He's got the tan.
The beard.
He's got the bod. He's got the beard. He's got the fresh cut, the chain. This is your era right now.
It's the first time someone's invoked Mark Zuckerberg when the context is looking more Cuban. I'm not really sure how I pull that one off.
Zuckerberg, man, looks like a reggaeton star these days. Here's Ray Haynes asking Mania trip for you guys. This is one for you. Headed to Vegas on April 14th for Mania week. He's doing the whole thing if he survives the entire week. I know I'm always with my kids on Mania week, but
are you doing it this year?
I can't. Like I got my
You're
wife's
saving up for
birthday. I got my
Riyadh?
kids. It's just it's
You're
a
saving
tough
up
one.
for Riyadh, the Riyadh Royal Rumble.
That is going to be a cultural experience.
Yeah.
There definitely will be monkeys at that one. They got all kinds of wild animals.
I know.
They train falcons. Come on.
I know. It's a shame. I do like it when you're out there, even with your kids. I don't sign up for the family-friendly Mania. Mine's a little bit more debaucherous. Mine's more Attitude Era, especially in Sin City. I will be out there for both nights of WrestleMania. I will be there for the Raw after Mania, which I can confirm will start at 5 p.m. local. I know it's going to be interesting to see these Netflix start times next week. Beginning next week, they're doing a European leg, and that's like Cena's return now as he's like heel. He's got a 3-week stretch. I think at least 2 of those weeks they're in Europe.
Are they live?
They're going to be live on Netflix.
Huh.
SmackDown's going to be on a tape delay. So that's going to be a little unfortunate because right now his program's with Cody, and Cody's a SmackDown superstar. But Cena's first appearance is going to happen at 3 p.m. Eastern on Monday, live on Netflix.
Man, Europe is becoming really a WWE haven. The shows have been awesome.
Crazy revenue generator.
The talent has improved considerably from Alex Wonderkind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
scouting networks have also improved independent promotions, and the internet. Honestly, if you do well in Ireland in some indie promotion, you can become Finn Balor. Who's really good at scouting that talent is New Japan. New Japan has become a feeder system for all these other major promotions because they have their scouts looking at all those other promotions across Australia. A lot of great Australians. Cal Fletcher I think the world of that guy.
Yeah, both those guys were.
Yeah, fantastic scouting network. And New Japan, honestly, they probably do get finder's fees because their scouting network is deep. It's like a proper feeder club, like the way when Southampton really had it cooking, Pete. When Southampton was so good at identifying talent and then just flipping the talent, like the way that Brighton is right now.
I was gonna say that's what Brighton is.
Brighton,
now.
that's what New Japan Wrestling is. But as I'm sure you know that, I'm probably stealing your own take.
Yeah, we'll look for Japanese wrestling takes from Peter in the future. So speaking of someone who's been around, this guy here was obviously in Mexico. He was in ECW during the prime of ECW. Some of the best matches ever with Juventud Guerrera. The height of the Nitro era, one of the icons to me of the Nitro era. And then WWE pretty much since then, and that is Rey Mysterio. This guy, I mean, look, I could have picked him any week. He is such a legend. But at 50 years old, he did a spot on Monday. I think it was on Monday, where he jumped from the turnbuckle to somebody that was standing on the ropes, not on on the turnbuckle, like just on the free ropes, and did a Hurricane Rana off the top. A crazy spot for a 50-year-old. Pulled it off perfectly. Great balance, great vert. The fact that he's 50 is crazy because he's a high flyer, number one. Number two, he takes a lot of bumps. I don't think he gets enough credit, Mike, we talk about the Jeff Hardys of the world and guys like that. Rey Mysterio has taken some of the nastiest bumps. They might not be like flying through a million tables, but as far as like match to match getting crushed on his back, Rey Mysterio famously got, catapulted into the production truck by Kevin Nash.
Lawn darted.
This guy has taken some crazy bumps, still does to this day.
One of the most insane bumps I've ever seen in professional wrestling was when he was strapped to a gurney. Remember that backboard that he was on, and Big Show just picks up the entire thing, slams it against a turnbuckle, and lets it fall. Doesn't do the thing where he just bangs it a couple times and holds on to it. slams him and lets him fall face first with no way to brace his
What
fall.
a feeling that must have been. But he does it for the business, man. His wife keeps kayfabe all the time. I've never seen his wife like acting normal. She's always playing the character. And of course, his son, one of the best in the game.
Are you putting up Dominic because that's Ray? Is that Ray's son? Wow, you are meta right now with this wrestling gimmick.
Dominic. So Dominic said, "Please let's read the question here. Can Dawson please integrate some of Ohio State and SMU offensive plays where they scheme personnel open while putting defensive players in multiple motions to read the defense, then attack the weakest link?"
Thank you, Dirty Dom. That is, Pete is operating on such a different level with this wrestling gimmick.
I think when we kind of were joking with Pete about production, he just took it to like a whole nother level. The graphics have been just unreal. The segment has been the sensation, and Dynamite used
where Mysterio really excels, and where he's probably taken a lot of punishment over his career is like, I don't think anyone's ever been better at the David Goliath type of match. WWE went to the well with it. I will say, like, his program, if you look back on it, that he worked with Brock Lesnar, was one of Brock's best programs. And that had Heyman's fingerprints all over it because Ray's an ECW guy. The match that he had at One Night Stand, the match with Eddie Guerrero at Halloween Havoc, this guy's an absolute legend. He doesn't nearly get enough credit. He's the most marketable Mexican wrestler of all time. He's going to be selling merch 100 years from now. He's got a lineage. His son, Dominic, is one of the most over heels and has been for a long time. His match with his son at WrestleMania 2 years ago was my favorite match on a great card that had Rhea Ripley and Charlotte Flair on it. Rey Mysterio does not get enough credit, and he is still consensus the greatest Mexican luchador of all time. Still not enough credit. One of the greatest wrestlers ever. Certainly one of the greatest high flyers ever.
You made a great point I want to emphasize, which is the fact that he's the best at David Goliath matches. Now, one of my big criticisms of modern wrestling is the size problem. There's too many people promoted that just are not, to me, very believable as champions. And I think I go back to NXT, the black and gold. Everybody loved NXT black and gold. And you hated like Johnny Gargano and Adam Cole, and they were supposed to be like these great dominant fighters. It's just not realistic when they're going against a bigger guy, because if the bigger guy, like, it's like boxing. If you have a good big guy and a good little guy, the good big guy is going to win. The only way that you can win is like a crazy upset. So Rey Mysterio has always wrestled like a little guy. He has high flying. He sells like crazy. He loses a lot. And then when he wins, it's like unexpected.
But he has a proper fighting style when he enters these, where it's like Gargano and Adam Cole like try to go toe-to-toe with you, and it does.
They just act like they're big. All those little guys.
Yeah, it does make you suspend disbelief.
It's too hard. And
where Mysterio's like drop kicking your shins and trying to get you on your knees, and then getting you on the second rope so he can do some work and level the playing field. He's really good in the ring, and the psychology that he applies to his size with his moveset is unparalleled.
Because he's old school. We associate with the new school because of the flying, but Rey Mysterio at his heart is old school. The Halloween Havoc match, to me, top 5 all-time match. Finn Balor, same thing. Finn Balor puts the makeup on. He's destroying Bobby Lashley. I mean, come on. You know what I mean? Like, don't do that to me. Rey Mysterio always respecting the business. Ushered in a new era, but is firmly old school. That is why he, to me, is my wrestler of the week. Day saying, came in late. All that's left are the herpes monkeys. I cannot confirm that the monkey that battled Neil Dow, the father of Prohibition, was in fact a herpes-infested monkey, although they are, as we discussed on a prior episode, in Silver Spring State Park in Florida, which I went to. I didn't see the monkeys. They weren't there that day.
What's your song of the week?
Keep it Mexican, right? Let's keep it Mexican-American with my song of the week, which is just a classic. This is a live recording that sounds like it's in the studio. 911 by Fuerza Aguila, and it's not in the graphic, but Grupo de Frontera also in that one. So 2 super groups. And to me, the 2 top American bands right now, period, point blank. They play Mexican music. They're Mexican-American, but they are in fact American. They were both born here on this side of the border in Texas. And you go to Spotify, you look at the streams of these bands, they're beyond any other American band, I'm pretty sure, at least any other modern American band. These are like major superstars that people that don't speak Spanish may not have heard of, but they are monster bands here in America, and they both have different styles. What I like about these guys, and what I love about this Mexican movement in general, is they play kind of that old school mariachi sound, but they're not like the skilled musicians that the mariachis were. These guys are like a garage band. So it's like a garage band.
I love garage rock.
Playing mariachi music. And, you know, the aesthetic of the video is kind of like rap videos. What are you laughing about?
Nothing.
What are you laughing about? What's so funny?
I'm not laughing at anything. Just keep going.
We'll find out what this.
I gotta find out what's happening there.
What the source of this is. Anyway,
You guys just look at the comments and go for it.
Sorry. All right. I can't comment on Juan Manuel Ventura's emojis. I see heart emojis, so you think it'd be a wholesome comment from Juan Manuel, but in fact, cannot repeat the comment from Juan Manuel. But your point, I understand what you're saying. So, what can I say? Brian getting here late talking about JD Arteaga. Juan Manuel's already on his honeymoon. But yeah, so these two bands, this performance in general, this song, incredible. Two different styles. Fuerza Alegre, more your mariachi style with the garage flavor. Grupo Frontera is more like, that's like right on the border music. They use accordions. The accordion brought to Mexico by German immigrants and has become a staple of northern Mexican music. They use it to perfection. I'm telling you, go to Spotify, check the streams. These are the two biggest bands in America, and they come together on this song, which is just an incredible live number. One of the best, 911.
I'm learning. The two of the biggest bands in America don't actually play English music. So that's pretty crazy. I will check the Spotify streams, and I can't wait to check that out on our Canes Insight playlist that is available on both Spotify and Apple Music. You will see these songs already added to that playlist. Today is March 12th, but yesterday was 311 Day, and 311 is one of my guiltiest pleasures in all of music, and it is my song of the week, Champagne by 311. I have seen 311 in concert at least close to a dozen times. Me with an indie rock bass, being mad eclectic, maybe accused of being a hipster once or twice in my life. 311 doesn't really mesh with any of that. D-Money, where do you think the band 311 is from?
I would have assumed before looking it up before the show, Southern California, at most Arizona.
Yeah,
that's as far east as you're going to go.
Great SoCal sound, SoCal vibes with Nick Hexum, who's aged magnificently. That is such a traditional SoCal type of vibe. They're from Lincoln, Nebraska.
Crazy.
They're from Nebraska. They're from dead in the middle of the country with this insane sound that doesn't really replicate preconceived notions of what you might have of the Nebraska music scene. But 311's been doing this for a long time, about 25 years. Every 311 Day, they have a huge concert for their most hardcore fans. I don't think I'd be classified as one of their most hardcore fans. It's someone that routinely looks at the 311 Day set list, wondering what the hell are these songs. But they've got so many commercial hits. For me, 311 isn't an album band. No, this is a radio airplay band. And while you are listening to your K-Rocks or your Zetas, you could always count on once every 9 months an earworm from 311. It might be a little something soft that your girl might like. It might be something that you'd have with a beer in your hand, having immaculate vibes. But 311 isn't a bad vibe. They may be corny, they may be cheesy, but that has a spot in music and always will. They have good vibes. I wouldn't necessarily call myself someone that would align themselves with what a typical 311 fan might look and act like. But
I don't know, you got the chain, you get the tan, you look like you get the surfer style right now.
I mean, I like THC, and that might be the tie that binds between me and most 311 fans. I don't like thong sandals though, and I certainly don't like dreads, especially on white people. Most specifically on white people. In fact, uniquely on white people. However, I like 311. I've traveled the nation to see them. I've seen them play at Universal Studios. I saw them play a show in Maine. I saw them play a show in Boston. I like 311. If you go and dig deep into their, not even deep, go to like the first 15 songs on their top songs. I guarantee you can play it and you could last the entire day before you notice that, oh man, I'm a 311 fan. 311 Day, wanted to celebrate them with one of my favorite songs, Champagne, which goes Champagne, California on the brain. I often have California on the brain. So Champagne, great song, great vibe. A band that is probably simultaneously overrated and underrated. Believe me when I say I'm a 311 fan, but I get it. I get the hate. It's a guilty pleasure.
10 million records sold. I like the song you picked. It kind of reminds me of like the Red Hot Chili Peppers from the Hillel Slovak era before Frusciante with the more of the rockin' sound. So enjoyed that record. Growing up, the rumor was always that 311 meant KKK because the 11th letter of the alphabet is K, so 3 Ks. But apparently it's just like the police code for obscenity.
Yeah,
because one of their friends got arrested for skinny dipping. So
yeah,
shout out to 311.
They can't be confused with white supremacy. 311.
No.
Nah, they don't really make they make really chill music. And Amber is probably a better song. I'll Be Here a While. I like some of their harder songs like Flowing and Down, but Champagne, in terms of, I have so many 311 songs on my Boat and Beach Day playlist. It's just a great vibe, a great table setter. Nobody really has strong feelings when they hear a 311 song. They like to go with the vibe. You probably know all the words to Amber and may not even know the band 311. A great cover song with I Will Always Love You, a love song, I'm sorry, by The Cure, one of, on the 51st Dates soundtrack. They've had longevity in this industry. It's irrefutable. They're doing something right. And Nick Hexum, I don't know if you've seen this guy's body lately. He did a spread for Muscle and Fitness. The guy's like peak form now.
311. Yeah, listen. I'm a fan. I mean, I'm not like you, but you got to respect it. When you're that around that long, you sell that many records. You could tell what kind of song it is when you hear it. They're pretty recognizable.
As I got older, I get way less judgy, and I admire longevity. It's a hard thing to do, even with Kid Rock, who I'm not a fan of. I got to admire how long he's stayed relevant, how he's been able to reshape himself, how I will still find guilty pleasures in certainly some of his older releases. I think it's art. Art is subjective. One thing that I don't really want to do, unless it's like an industry plant, is hate on art. I can just say, I can lift my hands up and say, that's not for me. Lord knows I run into that all the time. I could see the appeal. I could see what they're going for, but it's not for me. And I think most people should offer that to artists, because I was a really surly kid, judgmental, like most people that were into rock when they were teenagers, rebelling against what was mainstream. And now I love all that mainstream crap.
Yeah, I remember my wife was into Incubus when we met, and I just said how much they sucked. But I still think they suck, so I guess I haven't grown that much.
I'm a big
then.
Incubus guy too.
Oh, we'll leave that for a future show. Brian, shout out to Brian. Let's shout out the newest Kane fan, hopefully future OL. Brian Jr., born March 6, 2025, 10 pounds and 21 inches.
Hoss.
Keep an eye on young Brian Jr.
Trenches.
That is trenches all day. Shout out to you, Brian. Always appreciate your support of the program. And yeah, man, that's awesome. Congrats.
818 Cali Kane, California on the brain.
He's been heavy asking this. So let's get to, we did get to it on an episode. You may have missed it right when it happened, but let's get to, you pose a question that I want to get to.
Hard out in 3 minutes.
Real quick.
I got to
do it. So real quick. Is John Cena the greatest heel turn to you guys? For me, I still got Shawn Michaels throwing Marty Jannetty through the window, and then Hulk Hogan. Those are my two.
I think Hulk Hogan probably is the greatest heel turn of all time. Shawn Michaels was a great one in terms of memorable and what it did to Shawn's career, but that was like a mid-card feud. Top line heel turn. I think they kind of nailed it. I know that there was conjecture about this actually happening at Mania. That's what I thought I preferred, and now I'm super excited. I get a couple months build of a heel John Cena. We'll have more thoughts on this after John makes his eagerly awaited debut as a heel on Monday Night Raw, which is Monday afternoon Raw for us here in the States.
He's going to kill it. That's a long build like that to kind of perform. That's really what he's best at. Real quick, before we let you go, we talked about the baseball season potentially going two ways. We're focusing on the positive here, and you can witness the turnaround yourself. It's time. One of the biggest in-state rivalries is coming to Alex Rodriguez Park at Mark Like Field. Your Miami Hurricanes take on the FSU Seminoles in a 3-game showdown starting Thursday, not Friday, March 20th at 7 p.m., followed by Friday at 8 p.m. and Saturday at 7 p.m. Don't miss a pitch or a milkshake. Get your tickets now, MiamiHurricanes.com/baseball. That's MiamiHurricanes.com/baseball. Look, hopefully the Canes turn around. Obviously, it's a rivalry game. FSU's got some major league studs, potentially the first overall pick in the draft in Jamie Arnold. So at a minimum, you check out that great talent, but hopefully you're seeing that talent get upset by your Miami Hurricanes. Also, real quick, canesconnection.com/CIS. You're going to support all these programs. That is the way to do it. canesconnection.com/CIS. A lot of exclusive content coming your way if you sign up with that link. A lot of breaking news coming on that front in the weeks to come.
Pete, I feel like I box you out on the heel conversation. Next week, if you could put together and bless us with the top 5 heel terms as Peter Ariz sees them in wrestling history, that would knock me on my butt.
See what I can do.
Go Canes.
Go Canes.
See you next week.
Go wrestling fan, Pete.